This is Jason Rarica with YellowWood Wealth Solutions. Summer is upon us, which means we are starting to embark on vacation season. That also happens to have a one-to-one correlation with the I've got a great idea, I should buy a vacation property season. So if that happens to be you, stay tuned to this video where we're going to talk about the pros and cons of owning a vacation property and what are the 5 things that you should do to make sure you have a good plan in place to enjoy having that property. So to start off, the pros and cons. We talk to our clients and our friends that have vacation properties and ask them, what do they enjoy about it? What do they not enjoy about it? So the things that people enjoy about having a vacation property are really centered around the ease of use. So it's knowing the community, knowing where the supermarket is, knowing where the restaurants are, knowing how to get there even as much. Just makes it really enjoyable to be down there, to know where to go and what to do. Also, having your personal artifacts there, clothes, beach toys, maybe your skis or snowboards, wherever the vacation property happens to be, having all that stuff there makes it easier to be able to just, at the drop of a hat, go without planning and thinking about, I gotta find a place online, I've gotta book it, I've gotta pack everything for it, and I've already predetermined that these are the number of days that I'm going to go. If you have your own property, you can go at the drop of a hat for 2 days, you could go for 2 weeks, whatever it is that you wanna do. And then lastly, if you're the type of personality that enjoys traditions, then having your own property gives you the ability to do just that. You might say, every year for the 4th of July, we're gonna have the family down to the beach, and that's gonna be our family tradition. Well, if that's the case, well then you'll be able to do that for years and years and years, and you and your kids and your grandkids will be able to enjoy building those memories and having those traditions at your property. Now, the disadvantages I think are pretty obvious to having a vacation property. A lot of them are centered around time and cost. So cost is the first and foremost one. So there's the cost around maintenance, possibly a management company, insurance, taxes, and it seems like if you own a vacation property, every time you go there, there's some unexpected cost or fix that needs to be done. Secondly would be time. As life changes, so does your availability to use your rental or your vacation property. So when you have small children, you might be able to go more frequently because they're small, they're kind of going with you everywhere as it is. As your children start to grow up and be involved in the community and more activities, you're gonna have less time to be able to go. When they go off to college, you're gonna have more time again to be able to go, but then again, they'll be going to college at that point. So time is, and the fluctuation of availability is one. And then lastly, if you enjoy having a lot of different experiences, if owning a vacation property precludes you from being able to spend money and go on other experiences, go to other places, then eventually the property might become a little bit monotonous and some of the novelty might wear off and you might start to use it less, which it then becomes less enjoyable because you're still paying all the same costs for something that you're just not using as much and you're not getting as much enjoyment out of. So those are some of the pros and cons. If you're still interested in after hearing that, let's jump into the 5 things that you should do to have a good plan for your vacation property. So first of all, you need to define how are you going to use this property. Is the property going to be for you and your family? Is it going to be for family and friends? Is it going to be primarily for family and friends and a little bit for rentals? Or are you going to rent the property altogether? That's a very important thing to understand on the front end because that's going to make a huge impact on some of these other decisions that you have to take into consideration. So secondly, how or who should own that property? So if it's going to be a rental property, you might want to put it into an LLC. If it's going to be your personal property, then you may want to consider owning it in your name or in joint or possibly owning it in a trust. You're going to want to talk to your attorney to help make that type of a decision because that affects not only the liability that you take on, but also it affects your estate plan. So you need to make sure the way you own the property aligns to protect yourself and that if something happens to you, the property can pass to the right people in the right way. Next thing you need to look at doing is how are you going to take care of the property? So maintenance is a big thing at vacation properties, more so at the beach than it is in the mountains. At the beach, obviously you have saltwater air, which eats away at everything. But you need to think about how you're going to do the maintenance. Do you want to pay somebody to do the maintenance for you? Obviously, there's a cost that goes with that. There's a little bit of a premium for paying for someone to outsource all that. Or would you prefer to do it yourself? The cost there is going to be your time. Do you want to spend your time when you go down to your property for vacation working on the property, or do you want to go down there and purely just enjoy being there? So you're going to pay something one way or another. It's either going to be your money or your time. So you got to figure out how do you want to take care of the property. The next thing you need to think about is how are you going to protect the property and yourself? This will be a conversation with your property and casualty insurance agent. So you're going to need to think about and understand the risks and the costs associated with insuring the property. Again, if you're going to do rentals, then you're probably going to need some kind of a business liability policy that you're going to have to look at. If you're going to primarily keep it for yourself, then you might want to increase your own personal umbrella policy. But if nothing else, you're going to want to have very real expectations for what the homeowner's policy is going to look like. Similar to the maintenance side of things, if you have a property that's at the beach versus at the mountains, we've seen with all of the hurricanes and storms that we've had over the last several years, the wind damage has been a ton. And as such, the cost of insuring your home for just your basic homeowner's insurance at the beach has gone up significantly. So you might want to make sure that you have a good understanding from your insurance agent. What are the actual costs and how do I expect the cost to increase in future years to insure my property? And then the last thing you're going to want to look at is what are my tax considerations? This is going to involve talking to your CPA because you're going to want to know, again, if you're going to do some rentals here, you need to make sure there's only a certain amount of time you can use it if it's primarily a rental property and you want to be able to deduct a bunch of expenses and position it that way from a tax perspective. If you're going to use it primarily for personal property, there's only a certain amount of days that you can rent it out and not have to report that income. So you're going to want to talk to your CPA to make sure that you are operating the property correctly so that it is as advantageous from a tax perspective as possible. Satisfaction is defined as when reality meets expectations. So if you can go through these steps and if you can set good expectations for how you're going to use the property, how you're going to protect the property, who's going to own the property, how you're going to take care of the property, and all those other things, then your expectations will most likely align with what your reality is, and hopefully you'll enjoy having that property as a result. The last thing we want to talk about though, before you go ahead and buy a property, is you should consider what your alternatives are. In today's world, as a vacationer, you have more options than you've ever had before. Maybe owning a property is the right thing for you, but if you've never done that before, you might want to consider what's called a fractional. Fractionals are a fractional ownership in a vacation property. These are done through a management company. You may or may not know the other owners, but you're paying the management company to essentially facilitate that property, the maintenance, the taxes, everything that goes into that, you pay them, they'll tell you what everybody owes, you pay them, and then they'll take care of it all for you. The downside to that is obviously you own a fraction of it, therefore you own a fraction of the time that you can use it. But it can be a good option for somebody who has never owned a vacation property to get their feet wet and to determine whether or not they really like it, and if they want more, they can sell their fractional ownership and go buy a property by themselves. Another thing to look at would be your traditional timeshares. I think most people are familiar with those. Vacation clubs is another one. I think Marriott's the most well-known in that world. They have properties all over the world that you can go to if you're part of their vacation club. And then there are a lot of other smaller property companies that own select number of properties. Maybe it's a little bit higher end, and they're going to curate experiences for adults or for families to go to. Auberge would be one that comes to mind in that world, but there are several others that do it as well. So it's important that you consider these alternatives before you take the leap to buying your own property, because it's expensive and it's a big commitment that you need to make. So you do yourself well to make sure that you've considered every option available to you, and if at the end of the day, buying a vacation property is still the right choice for you, then you know that you're doing it with a clear conscience, a good plan, and you're likely going to enjoy having it. If this is something you'd like to consider further and you'd like to talk about it, please feel free to reach out to us. If you know somebody that's considering this, please pass this video along or have them reach out to us as well. Have a great day. Thanks for tuning in.